Judy and Gene Kelly are now about to meet cute in the best Hollywood tradition. Gene did his very first Hollywood film with Judy. They filmed it just about 5 years before they were making The Pirate. It was an MGM musical called For Me and My Gal. Kelly told Clive Hirschhorn, one of his own biographers, that it was Judy who really pulled him through their first film together, For Me and My Gal. Her screen technique taught me virtually everything I learned. I knew nothing about filming when we started, and I was scared. But by the time we had finished, I'd picked up quite a lot of know-how, thanks to our director, Busby Berkeley, and thanks to her. She was very kind and helpful, more than she realized, because I watched her to find out what I had to do. She pitched her voice and her gestures very low because she knew, which I didn't, that the soundtrack and camera pick up everything. I was amazed at her skill. She knew every mark and every move. She was a very relaxed, marvelous person, the most talented performer we've ever had, and my favorite partner.
Gosh, I never expected...
Joe.
I certainly am surprised to see you. For a minute, I thought...
Joe, don't talk. Just stand there. Okay, I got it.
In Minnelli's autobiography, I Remember It Well, Gene Kelly is quoted, "The joy of working with Judy was her great capacity for laughter. She laughed and she wanted to laugh. All I had to do was snap my fingers. When I made a goof, this made her laugh too. She had the movie-wise kid's knowledge that a scene could be taken over again. Coming from the theater as I had, I didn't know that. I used to die every time I made a mistake. This to Judy, and everyone else, was very funny." In his interview with Joel E. Siegel, Kelly explained the concept of the cigarette trick he shared with Dorothy Tuttle-Nitch. Quote, "It's an old trick. You just have to have guts enough to try it. It's not a prepared cigarette. It's just a gag I thought up to do. I did it in high school as a show-off gag. You're smoking, and you put your tongue over the cigarette. You just have to not have the fear of doing it. It won't burn you. It's a very simple trick. People are afraid to do it." Well, not only were people afraid to do it, but the dancer in question didn't want to do it at all. That's Dorothy Tuttle, who did the cigarette trick with Gene. She was an MGM contract dancer. You see her in Meet Me in St. Louis and the Harvey Girls and American in Paris. I have a quote from Dorothy that I'll share with you. I'd asked her about this number at one point, and she said, "Well, I was living at home with my mother and father, and my mother always wanted to know, 'What number are you having in the picture, dear?' And I said, 'Well, I have a number with Gene Kelly, and it's part solo, which is wonderful. It's called Nina.' Gene Kelly calls everybody Nina, and it's a Caribbean set, and Gene slides down a pole, and I'm sitting with a cigarette out of my mouth. And my mother said, 'A cigarette? You're a dancer. You can't.' And I said, 'Mother, it's just a part, and I play a lady of ill repute.' And my mother said, 'Oh, my God, a lady of ill repute.' And I said, 'Mother, it's a role. You wanted to know the number. This is what we're doing.' So I said, anyway, after Gene comes down the pole, and I'm sitting, he brings me up, he takes the cigarette out of my mouth. It's put inside of his mouth, and he leans me down and kisses me, and we go into the dance. And my mother said, 'He kisses you? Why, I do hope he's clean.' Well, you can imagine. I could hardly wait to get back to the studio and tell this to Gene. This was the spot in the film where Judy sang Cole Porter's song Voodoo, and she and Gene Kelly danced to it. She has sneaked away to see Seraphine's performance in spite of herself, and he's about to hypnotize her into confessing the secrets of her heart. He expects her to admit that she met Seraphine that afternoon and has fallen in love with him. Instead, she admits to love for Makoko, the pirate. Under hypnosis, she beats with abandon a whole set of drums that belong to Seraphine's theatrical troupe. The song evolves into a wild, frenzied dance duet for Garland and Kelly, and it's this performance that suddenly brings in the crowds to see Kelly's troupe perform. They go crazy watching Manuela perform. The tent theater ultimately can't hold them all. The performance spills out into the town plaza and culminates in an ovation for the hypnotized Manuela. The people applauding loudest are the actors of Kelly's troupe, who know that thanks to her performance, they're going to eat the next day. Voodoo as a number ran into all kinds of problems. Hollywood columnist Hedda Hopper wrote about Voodoo in The Whole Truth and Nothing But, that the number was, quote, a hair curler. Gene and Judy flung themselves too eagerly into the spirit of things. It looked like a torrid romance. When Louis B. Mayer's executive assistant, Ida Koverman, saw the rushes for Voodoo, she actually dragged Mayer out of an executive conference so that he could see them too. He was appalled. "Burn the negative," he cried. "If that exhibition gets on any screen, we'll be raided by the police." Mayer called in Kelly, gave him a lecture on how to behave while dancing, and Voodoo was restaged. Gene remembers the number much the same way. Even prior to filming, he described the number to the Los Angeles Times as, quote, "vital, brutal, very barbaric. Judy carries it off in a way that I think will surprise everybody." Kelly put Judy's on-screen image into perspective when he spoke to Joel E. Siegel. There was talk that parts of it were too sexy for Judy to play. Louis B. Mayer always thought of her as the little girl who led the marches down Main Street with Andy Hardy, so there were reasons for cutting some of it. Dorothy Tuttle was a background dancer in Voodoo, and she remembers it much the same way. She said, "Gene Kelly was a genius and a very sexual person, and this was a very, very sexy number and very well done. It was supposed to be pretty wild and wonderful. And Judy liked the challenge of doing something different. But Louis B. Mayer wanted every picture a family picture. The number could not be that sexy, so it had to be changed a bit. So they did Voodoo again, and then they cut it out anyway." Voodoo was actually in the first two previews of The Pirate, but the preview cards, some of them loving it, some of them hating it, all boiled down to the same thing. It was too sensual for the time. In fact, one directive from the public just said, "Clean it up." In his book, Hollywood and Me, producer-writer Bernie Rothman writes about working with Kelly on the first Entertainment Hall of Fame Awards TV program in the early 1970s. His host for that show was Gene Kelly, with whom he had worked before. And in his recollections of the show, Rothman writes, "Gene is a charming host, introducing the presenters, talking about the honorees. The last to be inducted in the first Entertainment Hall of Fame is Judy Garland, who had left the planet only a year or so previously. Because he and Judy had been such good friends, Gene insists on doing Judy's honors himself. Knowing Judy was a treat," he says in the final moments of the program. "Working with her was a privilege. Surely America has produced no finer entertainer." Then he looked up from his script and into the camera. He could barely get these last improvised words out. "And you know something, ladies and gentlemen? I miss her very, very much."
The ladies pick their own husbands, and they marry them for love.
Yes, I know. It's a very stupid custom.